Hi, everybody. Looks like we are live, and welcome to the eighth episode of the Learning Bus webinar series. Joined by Cassie and me, we are your hosts for today, and really looking forward to this one as it's pretty relevant. We're talking about application training and such, and we have a very cool person, Brandon Neeb, who has joined us and he's with Microsoft, and we are kind of really excited to be talking about some of the things with respect to application trimming here. Cassie, over to you. How are you feeling today?
Great. I hope everyone had a great weekend and we are jumping into the week. And so thank you for joining us either on your early morning, your late night, or your mid morning. So we appreciate everyone who's joining with us around the world. Brandon, we're so glad to have you today and thanks for making the time. We really appreciate it. I mean, gosh, you've been at Microsoft how long?
25 years. It's been a long career. Yeah, most of my career
Wow.
here. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, it's almost like Survivor, like your flames, you're still standing there with your stick.
Yes,
That's
that's
great.
true.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're looking at, Vishark has some screens that he brought up, and we talk about how things have really changed for us especially for the UI UX look, the interfaces as Microsoft has gone through many things. And so I think Vishark's gonna flip through some things here as we start to talk about self-learning tools and self-learning humans and really how this has shifted for us.
Yeah, and this screen kind of covers it in a very short. The gist of it is we were looking at things as click here, simulation-based training, and now we are moving into a prompting-based scenario where we see prompt agent saying that, "Hey, what can I help you with?" And you'll need to kind of type in a question over there. That's how the shift has happened. So yeah, but yeah, before we start, as Cassie mentioned, Brandon, I have a little surprise for you. I have a few screens that I want to show you, huh? Let's see if this goes up. Yeah, recognize this, Brandon? This is
Yeah.
from 2015. It's a Windows Defender screen from 2015. And I had a little trouble digging this up, couldn't find a high-res image. But I just wanted to show this was 2015. And right after this, this is 2020, how Microsoft Defender has changed. So the interface has changed quite a bit, right? Now the next one is 2026, where it's more of security copilot and you have a
Right.
copilot scene and you have things. So can care to tell us a little more into how you
Y-
would have seen the shift, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let me give you a little background on my career too. Yeah. So 25 years at Microsoft. Most of that has been in content development, content publishing. My first 8 years or so were actually in a classroom teaching one day course, that kind of thing. And I've worked on, over those 25 years, worked on so many different products from SQL Server to Windows Client, what's now Dynamics product. But since about 2018 is when I started focusing more on security with what's now the Microsoft 365 Defender. That's what we call it today. But yeah, 2018 is about when I got started in the security space. Although I do recognize those screens from 2015, that was when Defender was more, yeah, that was the client kind of
Yeah.
scan your PC Defender. Now, what you're looking at now is the much more advanced cybersecurity IT Pro type of console that would be used for threat mitigation, extended defense and response, that kind of thing is what you're seeing today. So the product it's been an amazing journey just in the last 8 years. Where Microsoft has kind of really leaned in hard into the cybersecurity space to really have a industry competitive product that you see here. So yeah, it's exciting.
Hey,
A lot of change though.
Hey, Brandon, I have a question. So this screen that Vishark has up, does it matter on your licensing, on what tier licensing that you're at to get these screens, or is it just it comes standard out of the box, or do you have like a F1, E1, E3, so on and so forth?
Yeah, so it does matter. Yeah, the most of the cybersecurity stuff with the screen you're showing right here is Defender, and it's now we've got Sentinel on Defender actually. So you would need, like, for this, I would guess you would need an E5. probably I'm just basing on some of the things I see on the screen here, E5. And then Copilot, obviously you got Copilot highlighted on the right.
Yeah.
And then the new kind of thing in the last couple of years or so has been what's called the security Copilot,
Yeah.
which is, where we're using, AI effectively to, analyze your systems, look for threats, and which is a separate set of licensing above E5. Those that have it. Yeah, there's the SCU, the Security Consumption Unit, is how those are billed, because that's very much the difference is like Security Copilot and all the copilots, right? There's an incremental kind of cost to the usage, right? When you're talking about using AI, and so like Security Copilot, there's an incremental charge, whereas like a lot of the other services that, especially that are on the Microsoft 365 platform, are subscription based.
And not that this is a sales thing, because I know like this was the year they went from E5 to E7, and so is that what that huge difference is?
So I'm not a sales guy, so it's a good thing this isn't a sales call. So let me just preface that. The E7 license, though, that's the new one that they just launched in May. And the E7 has, mostly it's a lot of extra Entra stuff. So the Microsoft Identity has a lot of, and has some extra identity things in that tool. But I would, I'm not a licensed person, but I know generally what's going on in each of the SKUs.
Right.
Well, thanks for sharing more information on that, because I think that's one of the things when we do these kinds of sessions. People are like, wow, okay, great. Why, let me go look for that screen. And they go into their system and they're a system admin. They're like, I don't see that.
I don't have that. Yeah.
And then
sometimes it's licensed.
questions.
Sometimes it's licensing. Sometimes your organization might just have it turned off. Right. That's another thing. There's a lot of features that for whatever reason, they're just like, we're not ready to roll that out yet, and so we're just, we leave that off. But yeah.
Wow. Yeah, and with all that time you've spent, like 2 decades inside of Microsoft. Did you think you were going to be there 2 decades? Wow.
No. No. And in fact, I came here through an acquisition. So Microsoft had acquired a mid-market accounting company back in 2001. And so I was doing product support and training for that company. And so, 25 years. Totally did not expect it. But it just kept making sense.
All the things you've seen, right, over the 2 decades, you saw the shifts happen, going to a cloud server, going SaaS, GIU to web, and now we have AI. Like, how has that shifted? That's, I mean, 3 years ago, now it's like, boom, AI, right? And everybody's like, whoa, what is this? And now 3 years later, we're like, AI.
There's been really 2 big shifts in my career, and we hadn't even really fully absorbed the last one. And what I mean by that is, you heard the term digital transformation. We've been using that term for years and years at Microsoft, right? That concept of moving from on-prem to SaaS applications, right? Which has been going on for years now. But that was really kind of the big shift from a training standpoint and from a content publishing standpoint that we still haven't fully absorbed. And what I mean by why that was a big deal is, if you think about like Exchange Server 2013, right? When we used to release those on-prem, right? There's a 3-year cycle once that was out before the next Exchange 2016 came out. So we had 3 years where our training content was effectively not changing substantially, right? There'd be service packs within that 3-year time frame, but there was no substantial shift in the functionality of the product for 3 years. And so training could be relatively static in that time frame. Now that we've, and like I say, it's been going on for 10 years, but now that we've really shifted completely to the SaaS apps, now you've got situations where, if you look at your Microsoft 365 subscription, every month there's a button that's moved or a little feature that's been added. And so the release cadence of feature updates isn't once every 3 years. It's literally every month, or whatever month of some kind of new functionality or some kind of new feature comes online and available, and they feel comfortable releasing it, it gets released. So from a training standpoint, that really complicates things, right? Because our content doesn't need to get adjusted or built every 3 years. it needs to be updated every month. We need to be analyzing, especially like our live labs, right? People love going to our training for, to get live lab experience with the product, right? But if the buttons have moved a little bit every single month, we have to retest those live labs every month, and it's very difficult to kind of keep up with that. And not just and here's the other thing: it's not even just here's a new feature that just dropped, right? And now we have to build training around it or adjust our training for it. There's also scenarios where, because there's so much telemetry in who is using and how, like the M365 subscriptions are being used, that we also know what features aren't being used. And so there's cases where certain features, the product engineering people decide, hey, no one's using this. Let's take it offline and rebuild it in a different right. And so that impacts the training as well, because a lot of times they're not thinking about, well, what's the training impact if I take this set of features offline that nobody's using? But hey, it has an impact in, when we've got a 4-day course and maybe a couple hours of it might be built around a specific feature that was taken out. So anyway, so my point is SaaS has been a huge shift that we're still adjusting to, because of the nature of how dynamic the product has become and how training has to shift and change so quickly. And now all of a sudden, to your point, the last 3 years now, AI is now it's on top of that as well. And the challenge with AI is even different and unique in that, and it's sort of how I just explained a little bit ago about, subscription based versus consumption based, right? Is a lot of the AI services tend to be consumption based, and they can be expensive, right? Some of them, if anybody who's turned on Azure AI and started using it a little bit, or even the Security Copilot is the one I'm most familiar with, it doesn't take long, and that meter, the meter of how much you're using that service can it really take off very quickly. So the challenge we're running into from a training and content publishing standpoint on that stuff is, how do we give people live lab access to those services that are so expensive, right? And so that has been a significant challenge, and that leads us to that simulation type of content that that we're talking about today. And we tend to be doing more and more of those simulations because we can show that product, give people a sense with a simulation. We can give people a sense of what the AI looks like and how it can be used without exposing, the huge expense of using that service or, to people. Yeah.
I used to think about the cost of every time you're doing that. Remember back in the day when we paid dial-up and the minutes that you have to pay just for internet usage? You'd be like, oh my gosh, wait, what? I ran out of minutes. You think you keep going, So I totally understand that. Yeah, and I appreciate that you said from a training perspective, because I do a lot of training, and especially in the co-pilot space. And the one problem, and I'll just give this an example, one problem people would always say is, can they ask the developers to move the share button in a different place? Because I would always click on the leave and I'd hang up on my call. And I would say, I totally get it, but just remember it's there. You just got to practice, So the UI thing, I get it. Like buttons change, especially on teams here that we're delivering, that changes all the time. But one of the things that I love about what Microsoft is doing is how they're really enveloping it inside the applications. And can you share a little bit more about that?
About how Microsoft's put
they're moving more of the Copilot in the actual applications.
Oh, yes.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and that's all over the place. Yes. And in fact, that has made our kind of skilling strategy interesting over the last year or so, because at first, especially, product marketing and product groups at Microsoft, like, hey, build training around my copilots and around my AI features and all that. And it's like, well, these are bedded within products that we already have a curriculum based, right, around how to use Defender, how to use Sentinel, et cetera. And so at first we're like, well, we're going to be embedding our Copilot story into, where appropriate, into our Entra training and into our Sentinel and into our Defender training, et cetera. And that's sort of the approach we took. But yeah, no, it was a challenge at first because product people think in terms in terms of the product. The product is the AI. Just tell people all about AI. And it's like, no, you really need to teach it in the context of where it's being used, especially Security Copilot, right? That Security Copilot's a product very much for IT professionals that are cybersecurity, and especially SecOps people, right, who are doing threat hunting and that kind of thing. And so you need to teach that product in the context of that particular role.
That's interesting because when you're looking at tools like your normal Office and other products versus these like cybersecurity tools which are extremely mission critical,
Right.
how does that impact training there? Because a single mistake can cost a lot. So how does that impact?
It can, and that's a good question. And it's one of the things that it's interesting to see how this is playing out, because the copilots have become so sophisticated so fast that they end up sort of being a training engine in and of themselves, right? Think about, if you think, especially Excel, who doesn't work in Excel sometimes, and then get to that point where they're like, gosh, I know Excel can do this thing I want it to do. How do I make it right? And now you can just go into Excel Copilot and ask it a natural language question, and it gives you everything you need to click to do exactly what, and it interprets, and it does a really good job of knowing what you're trying to accomplish and gives you great instructions exactly how to do that. And so that's what I mean, right? Is now Copilot has kind of become the personal trainer for people, right? And so it makes our training that much more challenging, right? Because we need to think of, okay, what is our audience? Like my team that builds, like, and I didn't go over this in the intro, but my team builds all the certification exams for security at Microsoft, and then we build curriculums that support those role-based certifications. So we have to think about things in terms of, okay, like my team, what we're building is the training for the person who needs to do that role, right? And so for example, somebody who might be coming from CrowdStrike, right? They're maybe a CrowdStrike security professional. They're coming and now they're working for a company that's using Microsoft security stack. Okay, they're going to come to our 1 week training courses to learn, end to end what's important for security. But we also know there's a lot of scenarios, just like I said, that Excel scenario, right? Excel's, tangent a little bit to the security story, but the concept is the same in that we know there's lots of little scenarios that we can't cover in a week-long role-based training. And it's going to be important for that person to learn those particular skills in the moment, right? We kind of, those jobs to be done is kind of a framework that we're using, that people need to accomplish, and they need to learn about them in the moment. They can't go take a week of training or a day of training to learn about that thing. They need to figure it out right now. And Copilot's kind of filling that gap, right? Yeah.
Brandon, you know how I look at Copilot? It's Clippy's kids. Remember Clippy?
Yep.
Back in the day? Yeah. Now Clippy's kids have all grown up and they're like co-pilots all over the place. And now they're starting to have their kids, so it's like a growing ecosystem.
And Clippy got really smart is the thing, right? That's the difference. Clippy can interpret and kind of extrapolate what you're trying to accomplish much better than it used to.
Yeah, in many cases, filling the gaps also, right? Like for some people, like, you just have to put in a little bit of information, a little bit of context, and kind of it fills in the gaps, adds the rest. I mean, in many cases, but yeah,
right.
It's a huge thing.
Well, Brandon, for a lot of people who are doing the security things and they're using the AI agents, what do you think? What is the key piece when they're actually prompting their agent, or something maybe they're not thinking about when they're doing it? That's key piece when they're actually working in there.
Yeah, but there's another team of people that I work with that are working on specific Copilot training. One of the things I've started to learn from them, though, the approach they're taking in terms of putting the training together is teaching people how to interface with Copilot, right? Is the key to their curriculum. So whereas most of the training of most of the things that are built for my team are here's the procedures, here's how to do those procedures, here's where to go to do those things, right? The training for Copilot is very much focused on teaching people what Copilot can do, right? Giving them, context for the capabilities of it, but then also how to query it smartly, right? Because that ends up being a big piece of it. And and as anybody who's used these for a little bit of time knows, right, the more detail, right, the more specific you can get in your query, right, the more likely you are to get the detail that you're looking for, and the kind of answer you're looking for. And so that's the thing is teaching people how to prompt, not necessarily here's exactly what you need to put, right, but here's the framework for how you should be prompting AI. Tends to be the training that they're building.
Kind of like communication design, right? Sorry.
Yeah. No.
Kind of like
Exactly.
communication design, right? I mean, we're veering into that area of how to write a natural language in such a way that it gives adequate context and the right amount of information for the agent or copilot to kind of do the job effectively. So,
right.
It's no longer about just navigating a ribbon or understanding which set of buttons to click.
Exactly. And the thing that's interesting is, I mean, this world of generative AI is still so new, I think, to everybody in the last few years. Is there's this question of, well, should AI be, should we defer to it, or should we always trust it, or can we, how do we really interact with it in that sense? And what I find interesting, I'll just tell this story quick. In the last 6 months, I've had two different experiences with it. One, in January, had to build an audience profile for a new exam we were creating in this space. And I thought at first, I'm like, oh, this is going to take me a good couple days or more of research and trying to determine, what should be in this particular exam and what the audience looks like. But I ended up building like a 2-paragraph long query, right? Because I kind of knew what was involved, and kind of, I'm like, well, it's business professionals and they do this, but they don't do that. And so spent maybe 5 minutes or so, contriving a pretty long query, hit submit, thinking, well, maybe it'll give me something or it'll give me a start, right? It gave me 2 pages of just, and I thought, okay, I'll read through it and maybe I'll have to edit this a lot, right? Went through it and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. It's better than what I could have done, right? And I still went through it and some of the facts and stuff that it lists. I'm like, I want to double check, whatever. But it was amazing, right? Even though creating audience profiles is a very small, percentage of my job, it blew my mind. That's something that certainly would have taken 3 days, took 5-10 minutes, right, of creation of this. So that's one end, right, of the extreme of, wow, it's amazing what it can do. But then it was interesting because at about that same time in December, I have an American Express card, and I was trying to get a gift card for, American Express has all these points and you get gift cards, right? So I was ordering a gift card, and for Regal Theaters. They had Regal Theaters on the American Express site. And if people in the U.S. know that there's different theater chains all over the U.S., right? And they're not compatible with each other. Regal Theaters is on the West Coast. And American Express had this, and I thought to myself, why would American Express have this? It must work all over the country, right? So I did a Copilot query, and I'm like, hey, can I use a Regal Theater gift card at my Marcus Theaters? Because Marcus Theaters is mostly in the Midwest where I'm at. And AI came up with this. It said, yes, you can. And what's more is it came up with this amazing story of, oh yeah, of course they work together and they want to be compatible. And it gave me this whole long business reason for why, these two gift cards would, you could use gift cards interchangeably at these two places. And it was such a good story. I believed it, right? And I just thought, okay, I didn't double check it. I'm like, sure. So I get the gift card. And the consequence is I take this Regal gift card down the street to a Marcus Theater, and the guy, at the box office, the guy's like, well, they don't accept that. There's not one of those theaters for 1,000 miles from here. Why would you think that? And of course, in my brain, I'm thinking, hey, Copilot told me I could use that gift card. And of course, I didn't say that because, I'm like, okay, that's not a reasonable argument. But my point is, it goes to show you, you can't just trust everything it says explicitly. That was a pretty mild consequence for not checking. But, you still need to kind of double check when you do these things.
So Brandon, so, you're using Copilot all the time, and I'm curious, what model do you use?
Well, I work at Microsoft, so I use the Microsoft ones. Yeah, so the Promethean one that's in. Yeah, that's in.
Yeah,
Microsoft
so you just
Copilot.
leave it on the auto, and you just go ahead and continue. Okay.
Right. And then that's the thing, is when I'm at home, there's a different, right? I use the because I have Microsoft 365 at home, so I use that Copilot there. But then at work, there's the internal different one.
Oh,
yeah.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, your point about the human being in the loop and making sure that we, as trainers, right, we tell them 85% of it's going to be right. That other 15%, make sure you fact check it,
Right.
Read it, go through it, make sure, and especially if you're a security person and you're using the AI in your security, like Defender and whatnot, like
Right.
you got to fact check it, make sure that it's giving you the right information. What are some of your strategies around when you're doing the training about teaching people like the fact checking or what they're looking for? Like we're talking about, building those skills for those individuals.
Yeah. Well, the biggest thing is clicking in those sources, right? I mean, if when you do a Copilot, query, it usually, it'll inject links to the sources where it gets that information. And now in the example of that gift card thing, if I would have just clicked the link, it would have brought me to Regal where it said, these are only good at Regal. You know what I mean? That it's that simple, I think that's the biggest thing is if people actually don't just blindly trust. And now shame on me in that story, because like I wanted to believe it, right? I wanted to believe this gift card was going to work. And so I just kind of, yeah, sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks for that story, Copilot. But yeah, clicking. So that's the thing, is I think that's my best advice is clicking in those sources and actually doing just a double check to make sure it actually says that on, the company's website or whatever the source is.
So that would become an important part of the training program, right?
Yeah.
Any kind of simulation, that pointer, go check your sources. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, and the skills that you're actually teaching people too, when there's no one path anymore for when you're teaching. Basically before, when we do training, you would take a path and like, okay, I'm going to teach you these skills, but as you're going along the path, there's a lot of skills that get incorporated. Like, how are you now incorporating all of that and the different trajectories of path that people can take along when you're doing training and learning?
Oh boy. Yeah, that's a little more advanced than we're at this point, because and here's what I mean by that is most of what we teach are these multi-day courses, right? People come and they get access to a live lab environment. We're only just starting to provide like a live Copilot in those trainings. So most of the time we're teaching people rote procedures and whatnot in our content. And until I would say these things become low enough cost that we can incorporate, because that really right now there's an economic problem in that when we include like a live lab service or Azure AI or something in our live labs, it's fine for the problem we have is it's fine for those 8 hours when they're in the class and we're teaching them that stuff. The problem is when we make that available for a month, right? And then they go back to the office and then start using it, and then before long they've racked up thousands of dollars of AI charges on our learning accounts and stuff is tends to be a problem we battle. But so that's what I mean is until I think these services become really low cost, it will be the time when they're incorporated in a lot of our live training. But yeah, for right now they are, but most of it's done through simulations, right? It keeps coming. That's kind of a lot of the focus of this talk, right? Was on the use of simulations. And so that's what we keep coming back to is with the simulations, we completely control the cost of those services in the training environment, and we can control what they get to see, or what we want to show them, right? So they're not, I think there could be maybe not concerns, but I could imagine if we just had live Copilot usage for 8 hours and let people run wild with putting queries, that I think things could go off in different tangents. Maybe that might not be as productive too. So there's that. Yeah.
And how would we define mastery in that kind of a situation? Earlier, right? I mean, mastery would be like, okay, you can do the entire task by clicking these buttons and you can get the output. Now it's like um, different outputs each time you kind of use Copilot. And so
Yeah.
how would you define mastery in this case?
That's a really good question. And yeah, my brain immediately goes to validation and exams and like what we would ask in, in exams and on that type of topic. Because you're right? There's so many different ways to do things. There's not necessarily a wrong way as such. I have a feeling as our exams develop to accommodate more of these AI systems that it'll especially the generative copilots and stuff. I suspect that we'll see a lot more questions around the concepts of what you should be using them for and what they're most effective at. Right. That's where I have a feeling you're going to see a lot of the exam questions, because we're almost certainly not. I shouldn't say almost certainly, because who knows, but we're almost certainly not going to give people a live Copilot in an exam, right, and ask them to do something. You know what I mean? One, that would be really hard to score accurately, but yeah. So and to be honest, what we've done so far with experimentation is around simulations, even in the exam. So if you've taken any Microsoft certification exams, some of them, actually, I think most of them these days have some portion of live lab at the end, or there's a part where you go to, you go do something in the lab. That's all scored today with PowerShell scripts in the background, right? You go do something in a tenant, you hit submit, and then we run a PowerShell script that validates that you actually did that thing in the tenant. So the idea of asking somebody to do something in a Copilot, right? That it'd be incredibly hard, I think, using at least our existing scoring mechanisms with PowerShell. It'd be hard to score. But just to your point, with so many different ways of mastery, how would you judge that? So I suspect, again, it goes back to, I suspect what we'll likely end up doing is having questions that are more related to your knowledge of what Copilot can do and should do, would be my guess. But we'll see.
Interesting. Yeah, we'll see. In fact, as in, like you mentioned earlier, right? I mean, the tool itself is kind of helping you learn in many cases. And so sometimes if Copilot is available and if people are using it, then they can immediately go to it and ask the question and they'll get its answers. But then that would mean that we are moving away from that simulation-based training. But from what you mentioned right now, I don't know how far that's possible immediately because of the challenges with making licenses available to everybody and such. So in that simulation-based training, how do you see the change from earlier simulations where about, okay, click this button, do this workflow, and you get it there. But now when we have simulations with Copilot involved, obviously we are not going to get the same results as Copilot would give in a simulation, right? I mean, it would be a more of a screenshot based or something. So how does that change the?
Yeah. So simulations specifically with copilots, that is what we've done though, right? In the last couple of years when we've done those simulations is we go into the tool, we, literally you'll see text load into the prompt. It'll be the text that we put into the prompt and then it shows the results. So right now, I mean, that type of simulation training has been very illustrative, right? Just to show somebody, look, here's a type of prompt and here's what you can kind of expect to see, even though the results of that prompt might change from week to week or day to day, right? So it is very much a point in time. That's one of the challenges with simulations, right? Is that, we're recording whether it's a screen of a product or a screen of a Copilot, we're recording how that system is working in that particular point in time. What we have tried to focus on, our team, when we determine what types of things we do for simulations, we try to focus on, okay, what are the things we can't do in live lab? That's sort of how we start our planning, right? As we go, okay, in a live lab, we can show, how to do, you know, Sentinel, how to do Defender, how to create policies, that sort of thing. We can all do that in a live lab tenant. And so what we try to focus on, one of the things we can't do. So like if you look at, we have a course on Security Copilot, the SC 5006 course that we have. It's a 1-day course. There's no live labs. It's entirely simulation based. All the experiences are simulation based because, we literally couldn't provide that particular service in a live format. But if you look at those simulations, it's very much still walking you through the product. Here's using the product, but then here's a way to to do a query about this particular thing, right? And we show the query and show the results of the query. So in that sense, the simulations tend to be proof of concept, showing people how to use it in the flow of work. Since we can't, again, starting with the reality that we just can't provide live Copilot experiences necessarily. So that's what that's been the source of our simulations. In the simulation space, you're right. Things have changed a lot over the years. I mean, we've had simulations in our content for it's almost as long as I can remember. Right? It's been many, many years. What is interesting though is the difference in how they're produced. Right. So 10 years ago when we did simulations, it was a really expensive, resource intensive process. And so we tried to only do simulations for things that probably the product wouldn't change a lot. Right. So we felt, fine. We'll, if we're going to spend a lot of resources, we know we're not going to be able to do these every week or every month. So, and then also high volume, right? We would try to focus them on what are the things we think a lot of people would like to see, right? And so that was sort of the kind of decision point as far as when we built simulations, because they were so resource intensive. Now today, with systems like Articulate Storyline, and some of the platforms and stuff that you guys use, it's much lower cost, much less resource intensive to put together simulations. And so that bar is lowering, right? So the bar for what we would consider doing simulations for now is less resource intensive, less expensive. So we tend to be doing more of them. And like I said, for the last 2 years, really, what the driver has been, if we can't do a live lab, we have to do a simulation. So just do the simulation.
Yeah. Along with that, I mean, especially some of the simulations that we are doing right for Microsoft at Apposite, we are concentrating on that role-based journey rather than showing the interface and showing how to. We are like asking, what does this role do, and how can Copilot help this role in this sense? I guess this is a good strategy, right, for simulations if you're going ahead. It kind of reduces the entire thing on the interface itself more than it's about how the role kind of does the work. Any comments over that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I don't know that was primarily kind of the impetus for it. I mean, really, most of it is, again, comes back to cost, and people don't realize this, but when you do a Copilot query, you're using about 15 times as much processing power and electricity as when you did, a Bing search or a Google search, 3 years ago. And so there's so many more resources being utilized that, I mean, that's really mostly the driver of the simulations, is that like it's just so expensive to have people do it live. I mean, it's one of the things we get a lot of feedback even from customers who are like, I would really love it if you let me, do a bunch of queries for free so I could learn how to use them before I started running on my own meter, right, and incurring those costs. And it's just, we're like, I appreciate it, but yeah, it's an issue we just haven't come to solve yet. And so simulations sort of kind of release the pressure valve a little bit, right? Because here's a way for people to kind of experience it in some degree without incurring all the expenses.
Brandon, you mentioned December you designed a role that you were putting into a training, and then now we're in May does that same role still apply? Because I think, the target is moving so fast. How do you keep up with that?
Yeah, well, in January, what we were designing was it was a cybersecurity for business professionals role, and so people like us, or that work in a computer environment, but aren't necessarily IT professionals or aren't cybersecurity professionals. We wanted to create a curriculum for them. Is what that was. So that's the thing is, yeah, we try not to create things that that change dramatically that fast, because it's hard to one of my peer teams that actually focuses on Azure AI, they run into that, right? They create a lot of Azure AI content that ends up needing to be changed every so many months, and that is a challenge. But no, what we try in the cybersecurity team, we really try to focus on, okay, what's something we can build that's going to live for a little while, and we've had relatively consistent roles. Like in cybersecurity, right, there's a SecOps person who deals with threats that are active, right? There's a identity and access person who deals with making sure people only have access to the right stuff. And then we've got a data security person who makes sure the data isn't leaving when it's, and it shouldn't be. And, those are kind of our three key roles, in terms of our place. So we try to build around those.
But they still remain in 2027, Brandon?
Well, those roles, over time they probably combine, right? Or over time, let's say. I mean, that's kind of a thing we've seen even in my 8 years just in cybersecurity, is those were very distinct roles 6 years ago, right? They didn't really overlap. And now you are seeing more and more cybersecurity professionals that need to have kind of all three skill sets and have an eye towards compliance and understanding how privacy impacts and intersects with all those things. So, it's definitely a challenging space as it evolves.
Yeah, it sounds like though the different roles are melding together, especially along with AI. And as you start to build skills in there, and you start to blend everything, it's one role can eventually converge. Like you have three roles that can actually converge into one role eventually.
Sure, right. And that's the thing, is it's not just a matter of organizations getting smaller and they need to have fewer people to do more things. It's just the roles overlap is part of it, but then also the agents kind of enable that, right? You don't necessarily need a whole set of, maybe at a big company you do, but maybe you don't need a whole set of people just doing identity and access, just doing security operations. You can have a more generic security professional potentially with the use of copilots that can exactly kind of span multiple sets of roles. Exactly.
Yeah.
Ooh,
interesting.
Very interesting.
Eventually we'll start designing some of those agents as specific roles and start asking it questions once we start troubleshooting and building out things. And eventually I wonder if, it sounds like the agent eventually will be able to monitor things and say like, hey, look, you got this coming, you got to go ahead and fix this. And then you have to jump in as the human and dissect like what the actual issue and what the trigger was, right? It sounds like we're moving in that direction.
Yeah, no, absolutely. These agents, well, and that's kind of the thing. So this last year, one of the concepts that we've been building content around is, so there's security for agents, right? And then there's agent security. So security for agents is stuff like making sure agents only have access to the right information, right? So for example, if you have a public facing, agent for your customers, you don't want that agent having access to the payroll data for the people in your company. You don't want to expose that payroll data publicly, right? So there's a whole field of just securing the agents to make sure they only have access to what they do. And we do that in Microsoft with the Microsoft 365 through Entra, right? Is the product we use to, make sure agents have specific access to the right data. But to your point, it's like, so there's that type of training, right? But then there's also the training on using the agents like Security Copilot, right, to actually do security stuff on your behalf. And so this last year, that has kind of been how we've kind of differentiated what we're working on. Are we working on securing the agent or using the agent, right? Is kind of been the two sets of content that we've been focused on my group this last year.
And those of you who are online, if you have any questions for Brandon, definitely go ahead and put them in the chat, because we'd love to know what your thoughts are. Maybe there are some things that came up that we haven't talked about. I think Cecilia just talked about one way to think about roles is that many roles will remain, but how those roles do their work will quickly evolve with AI being a great enabler. So again, AI scaffolding for human potential versus a substitute, as she's saying. So it's definitely changing for us. Visakh, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about all of this, and what Brandon mentioned earlier, right? We stop and think now to use Copilot. Like we need to really understand, okay, this is how I need to prompt this in a particular way, which means that I need to reflect upon it a little bit, and not like the earlier time where if I understand the sequence of which buttons to click and what to do, I can get it done fast. So that time for reflection is very important, and how we kind of bringing that into the training programs, or simulations and such. Are we building that layer over there? Yeah.
Yeah, that's that's an interesting topic. Yeah, I was just also reading through some of the chats here as well.
Yeah, you can answer that one, then we'll jump to Merrick's question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just looking at Merrick's. Yeah, just to jump to that. Actually, I'm going to just jump to Merrick's questions first.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Because I was in the middle of reading it. So there's like he says, there's a big difference between Excel Copilot to provide instructions on how to do something compared to, for example, learning how to prompt to generate a pivot table. Right? Those are two very different things I talked about earlier in this call. Right? That concept that Copilot has kind of become your in-place trainer, right, within the application, and it's also can be an in-place doer, right? I know I've done some things like to your point where you can say, hey, go create this and it does it, right? It's interesting though, to your point, Visakh, though, it's like, is that good for us long term? And on the one hand, it just made me really productive, right? That it created the pivot table for me. But if I never learn to build it myself, is that a good thing? I don't know. Do we become dependent on
It's a
it,
question
long term?
definitely worth asking. Yeah.
Right.
Here's another question for you then, Brandon. How does it impact our critical thinking? Like when I do my trainings, I say in the world of AI, you need curiosity, you need creativity, you need critical thinking, and you need communication. But I'm wondering, like, how does that now change for us?
Yeah, it's wild. The thing I've been thinking about a lot is lately is if you use Copilot for retirement planning. So that's one thing I've been kind of using it for a lot the last year, and it's amazing at it. Right, it'll give you incredible detail about all your plans, but you still need to go into it knowing basic concepts, right? What like in the U.S. here, what are the pension rules? What are what are deferred tax accounts? You still need to kind of have a pretty reasonable framework and idea for how things and what things should work. You can't just go to Copilot and say, hey, give me a retirement plan. I've got this much money.
It will give you one, and probably it'll look really nice to you also.
Right. It'll be really generic, but you won't really have. It's hard, I think, to have confidence in it unless you kind of know. Okay, here's the big picture of what I need, and I'm going to use the Copilot to help me refine the plan. But I'm still using the context of the information I know about retirement planning as an example, right? Because you hear a lot of, and I hear a lot of this in the media, right? Like, oh, what's the point of going to college and getting a degree if I could just use Copilot to do stuff? And the reality is, though, is we still need to have a core set of understanding of things in order for us to be able to trust Copilot, and trust what it does, and make sure we can validate, right, like the stories I told about earlier in the call. So I don't see a day, at least my opinion, right? I don't see a day when none of us need any education because Copilot's there and it'll give us all the answers all the time. That just doesn't, that feels like still a long ways away, and it's
It would,
probably not a
it
good
would,
place to be.
dangerous
yeah,
territory also.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It'd be cool to see someone do a study or white paper on how, they say learning is that 10-20-70 rule. Now in the world of AI, how does it shift? And now that 10% becomes how much you need versus is there a 20 and do we just jump to 70? Like that shifting model, we haven't redesigned that and yet nobody's taking a stab at it. It'd be kind of cool to see if somebody has.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. It's a changing world for sure.
Yeah. Do learner journeys look different for you now with AI and how you're designing and with your simulations?
So good question. Our group is working on is this AI Skills Navigator is kind of the new platform that we're working on, and the idea behind that is, whereas in the past, let's compare it to kind of the learner journeys we had in the past. So in the past, if you went to Microsoft Learn, which has been our platform for 8 years or whatever now, and you could go and you could find a learner journey, right? You could go identify what your role is. Hey, my role is I'm a security operations professional. Okay, you go click that role, and here's all the courses that align to that particular role, and we'll even give you an order, right? You should do them in this. You should do this first. That right, and we have that order.
Then take the
That's
certification.
that's been for the longest time a learner journey, right? Now with the AI Skills Navigator, we're trying to develop a thing where you come to it and you say, look, not just here's my role, give me some training, but here's specifically the thing I'm working on, right? Which is something very detailed, right? Yes, I'm a security operations professional, but I do this specific type of work and I need to know how to do these very specific things. So instead of getting a learner journey that might have had 20 days, right, of courses and training, right? The idea is the AI Skills Navigator can say, okay, you need to learn this specific hour or this specific, you need to see these simulations, right? That's what's kind of what the amazing thing is doing with learner journeys, right? Is we're hoping to get to a place where you can go to that platform and your time, right? Think about how much more efficient that would be, right? If instead of spending 20 days or going through a mountain of content, now you're able to be directed specifically to a much narrower set of content that aligns directly with what you're trying to accomplish. That's the exciting thing we see coming.
So it
Would it
almost
be
sounds.
adaptive? Sorry, man. Go ahead,
No, go
Cassie.
ahead, Richard.
I was asking you, would the AI Skills Navigator, would it be adaptive as well? Like, you would, if somebody needs a lot more attention, then it would prescribe that much versus somebody who needs very focused, certain nugget or something, then it would
Yeah.
recommend that. Yeah.
The first bits of content that we're building on that platform, so they're called skilling sessions. If you go out to the AI Skills Navigator, you see there's skilling sessions out there. And what those are they're basically videos, right? 15 to 20 minute videos. But they cover content. And we're using AI to identify, we put the script together, we put the training together based on the fact that we know we need a skilling session on whatever topic is, right? But what AI is adding to those right now is like a deeper interaction, right? So you can in the past, if you would have watched one of the videos we generated, you go, okay, nice, I learned, right? And maybe at the end there's some links to some other content, right? Generic links that we just that might be related to this, may or may not. Right now, we're able to use AI Skills Navigator to say, oh, okay, you covered this content, and now the learner can actually ask questions in the video and have it embedded, and the AI is actually answering questions about that particular, and it's also coming up with quiz questions because one part of learning is getting the information, the other part is validating through
Testing.
some type of testing or querying, right? And so the AI is also generating quiz questions at the end based on the video you just watched, right? So that's at least the initial stages of some of the things that we're doing now. But it's really exciting because you've worked with us for a long time, Visakh, but it when we put content together, there's a long there and historically has been a long kind of cycle, right? It takes a long time. The product has to be built. We build the training on it. We release the training, et cetera. In a world where AI is helping with some of those ancillary things, like I just explained, we can get to a place that's really mature and well developed a lot faster than we could in the past.
And I was going to add on to Visakh in the sense where it'd be cool if you had an agent up front have a conversation with you to assess where you are and say, great, now you know where you are, and then go ahead and give the prescriptive, like learning path or learning journey, because now it's going to cover and focus on the areas that you really need to harness and really practice those scenarios, then rather than it's going to leverage your current knowledge to take you further, in other words.
Absolutely. And that's the expectation. And that's kind of what I'm saying, right? Is that these static learning paths or learner journeys that we used to build, that's yesterday. That's kind of the past. And yeah, the future is going to be dynamically adjusted learning paths for people based on their interaction with an AI.
Gosh, this world of learning has definitely changed and evolved. And you think about when you first started, when you moved into the training space, how did you do training then, and how has that pivoted and changed your thought process as well as the way you deliver to currently now?
Yeah, when I first trained my first course in the summer of 2000, it was on PCs in a room. I had to get there. So if the class started on a Monday, I had to get there on a Sunday to install the software on the PC, right? So starting from that world 26 years ago to where we are today, when people come to a class and either it's all online or it's a service, right? It's a SaaS service that there's no installations for, and even if somebody coming, here's the other thing, is people coming to a class, sometimes they're on different rings of different tenants, right? So people are like, you're showing me something that's in this training tenant that's not, kind of bringing us full circle to the beginning of this call, which was, different people see different things for different reasons in their tenant. And so I mean, that's kind of a very different challenge than we had 26 years ago.
What skills have changed for you, Brandon?
Oh, yeah. That's a tough one. I would say, my roles changed a lot, right? I went from 25 years ago, I was in the classroom most of the time, to now I manage a team of content publishers. So for me, I mean, it's been a career evolution, right? Where now I manage a team of people, and so I'm more of a coach than a trainer. So I guess that to answer that question for me, that's been kind of the evolution.
I mean, your journey has been pretty exciting. And I think with what you're doing and how you're really trying to help organizations train up their staff to protect their tenant and their environment and their content and their information, I think that's a key component. And I think that's one that's sometimes overlooked, by the regular individuals who are across the organization. They don't necessarily see the importance of that and the intensive training that an individual needs to go through in order to protect and put up those guardrails, right, for everybody to have around your system. When you're working with people and you're trying to teach them in this day and age, what is one of the things that we're seeing entirely different that will change in the next 3 years?
Oh, things that will change in the next 3 years. I think what you're going to find, and I've been reading more about this too, is that people's skills are going to be a lot more important than they were in the past, because if we've all got agents and we're all able to use agents and copilots to be way more productive, at the end of the day, the things that copilots and agents can't do are going to be significantly more valuable, I think, than they were in the past. So interacting with people, building consensuses, right? Those types of interpersonal kind of relationships are going to end up being a lot more valuable, and I think in the coming years than they've been in the past.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
I have a
That's
question
great.
for you, Brandon.
Yeah.
If tomorrow all of AI were to kind of disappear and we are back to probably the one in 3 years back, would it seriously impact your life, your productivity? How would you feel?
Yeah, I think it would. It's interesting from a cybersecurity perspective, which is where I come from. Is in cybersecurity, it's kind of like an arms race, right?
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
as good as is great, right? Security Copilot came on, and we're like, wow, this is going to be fantastic, right? It's going to amplify significantly the defending capabilities of SecOps professionals. But the reality is the hackers also got the Copilot, and they also got the right, and so now they're more powerful than they were before AI came along, and so it ends up being an arms race of would things be different? Maybe right, but it's in cybersecurity. It's like it seems to be a never-ending battle against like I say, an arms race between hackers and defenders. So
Right.
Well, thanks, Brandon, for spending this hour with us. It was really enlightening, learned a lot. Hopefully, audience, you learned a lot as well. Feel free to connect with Brandon on LinkedIn if you have any other questions maybe we didn't get to that he may want to answer or post up there for you. We really appreciate the time you spent with us. Vishark, any closing comments?
No comments. I think I'm very excited for the days and months to come by because there's a lot happening there. And clearly, I mean, and productivity is on an all-time high and it's increasing. So the next steps, like I think what Brandon mentioned, are those people skills, critical thinking, those kind of skills are very important for us to keep moving ahead.
And
So yeah,
joining
with
the
that,
Learning
yeah.
Buzz webinars all the time is a people skill you can do too.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you for the plug, Cassie. I would have forgotten that. But on that note, yes, this community is open to all of you. Please do join us. We would be conducting these webinars every month, and we would be inviting leaders like Brandon, who clearly seeing the shift, right there on the forefront. So we can kind of get to see that and learn from it and keep ourselves educated on what's coming next. So yeah, thank you so much, Brandon. This is
Thanks for
amazing.
joining
very
us.
good.
Thanks, Brandon, for all of these
Thank
around the world. Good night, good morning, and have a great day.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.